She saved his cattle in the storm. The lone rancher thought the Chinese girl was a miracle. The ranch sat alone at the edge of wide open land, where the road ended and the sky seemed to stretch forever. It belonged to Daniel Carter, a quiet man who had lived there for many years. He woke up before sunrise every day, worked until his body ached, and went to sleep with nothing but the sound of wind outside his window. He did not complain. This was the life he had chosen after losing the people who once made the house feel warm. The ranch was all he had left, and the cattle were his responsibility. That morning began like any other. The air was heavy, and the sky looked strange, but Daniel had seen odd weather before. He fed the cattle, checked the fences, and repaired a loose gate near the western field. The animals were restless, shifting their weight and making low sounds, but Daniel believed they would settle down. By midday, the wind picked up. Dark clouds rolled in fast, covering the sun as if someone had thrown a heavy blanket across the sky. Daniel stopped his work and looked up. His instincts told him something was wrong. He had heard no storm warning, but the land did not always wait for permission. The first thunder struck hard, shaking the ground. Rain followed soon after, heavy and sharp, turning dry soil into thick mud within minutes. Daniel ran toward the cattle fields, shouting and waving his arms, trying to keep the animals together. The wind screamed across the land. Fences began to bend. A large section near the lower field broke under the pressure of water and wind. Cattle started running in panic, slipping and colliding with one another. Daniel's heart raced. If they scattered into the valley, many would be lost. He tried to guide them toward higher ground, but the storm was stronger than his voice. That was when he saw her. Near the edge of the field, moving through the rain as if she belonged to it, was a young Chinese girl. She was small compared to the chaos around her, wearing a thin jacket already soaked through. Her dark hair was tied back, rain running down her face, but her eyes were focused and calm. Daniel recognized her. She had arrived at the nearby supply town weeks ago, asking for short-term work. Someone had sent her to the ranch to help clean storage areas and sort equipment. She spoke little, kept to herself, and never complained. Daniel shouted at her to get back to find shelter, but his words were swallowed by the wind. Instead of running away, she moved toward the cattle. She used slow movements, steady hands, and gentle sounds. Somehow, the animals responded. One by one, they followed her toward the narrow path leading uphill. Daniel watched in disbelief. He joined her, doing his best to help, but he quickly realized she understood something he did not. She was not fighting the cattle. She was guiding them. Rain hit them from all sides. Thunder cracked again, closer this time. Mud pulled at their boots. More fencing collapsed. Daniel slipped once and barely caught himself. Fear rose in his chest, not just for the cattle but for the girl. She was risking her life without hesitation. Together they worked for hours that felt like a lifetime. The girl moved ahead, leading small groups at a time, while Daniel blocked off dangerous paths. She never panicked. When a calf fell, she knelt in the mud, lifted its head, and waited patiently until it stood again. Her calm spread through the herd. Slowly, painfully, most of the cattle reached higher ground. As night approached, the storm grew worse. Visibility dropped. The rain became almost solid. Daniel turned to look for the girl, but she was gone. His chest tightened. He shouted her name, though he barely knew how to pronounce it. No answer came back. Only the sound of wind and rain. He had to make a choice. If he stayed searching, he risked losing the cattle he had just saved. If he left, he might never see the girl again. With heavy steps and a heavier heart, Daniel led the remaining cattle into a safe enclosure near the hill. Once the gate was secured, he ran back into the storm. The valley was flooded. Water rushed through it like a river that had been asleep for years and suddenly awakened. Daniel searched along the edges, calling out again and again. His voice cracked. Fear turned into guilt. He wondered why he had let her work during such weather, why he had assumed she would protect herself. Hours passed. The storm showed no mercy. Exhausted and soaked to the bone, Daniel was forced to retreat. The land had become too dangerous. He returned to the house just before dawn, his body shaking, his mind refusing to rest. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, replaying the day again and again. When morning finally came, the storm moved on as quickly as it had arrived. The sky was pale and quiet as if nothing terrible had happened. Daniel stepped outside. The ranch looked wounded. Broken fences lay scattered, trees were bent, mud covered everything. He wasted no time. He grabbed supplies, food, and dry blankets, then headed toward the valley. As he moved along the path, he heard a sound, a soft, low call. He followed it and stopped in shock. There, standing near a group of missing cattle, was the girl. She was muddy, exhausted, and had a small injury on her arm, but she was alive. The cattle stood close to her, calm and safe. Daniel felt his knees weaken. Relief washed over him so strongly that he had to sit down. The girl looked up, surprised to see him. She gave a small smile, tired but warm. In simple words, she explained that when the storm grew worse, she led the remaining cattle into a narrow valley she remembered from earlier work. The land there rose gently and protected them from the worst of the wind. She stayed awake all night to keep the animals together. Daniel listened in silence. He had lived on this land for decades, yet she had saved it in one night. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and gave her water. For the first time in years, his eyes filled with tears, not from loss but from gratitude. As they walked back toward the ranch together, the sun slowly climbed the sky. Daniel realized something had changed. The ranch no longer felt as empty as it had the day before. He did not know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. The storm had not only tested his land, it had brought someone into his life who felt nothing short of a miracle. The walk back to the ranch was slow and quiet. The girl moved carefully, her steps heavy from exhaustion. Daniel stayed close, watching her closely in case she stumbled. The cattle followed behind them, calm now, as if the storm had never happened. Morning light spread across the land, showing the damage clearly. Broken fences lay twisted in the mud. Small pools of water reflected the pale sky. The ranch looked tired, almost wounded, but it was still standing. When they reached the house, Daniel guided the girl inside. The warmth hit them both at once. She stood still for a moment, unsure, water dripping from her clothes onto the wooden floor. Daniel quickly found clean towels and placed them gently into her hands. He pointed toward a chair near the stove and motioned for her to sit. She nodded and obeyed, her body finally allowing itself to rest. Daniel filled a kettle and set it on the stove. As it heated, he glanced at her again and again. In the quiet room, the memory of the night felt unreal, like something from a dream. Yet the mud on their boots and the ache in his muscles told him it was real, very real. He handed her a warm cup and watched as she held it with both hands, letting the heat soak into her fingers. She drank slowly. After a while she spoke, choosing her words carefully. She told him her name was May. She had grown up in a farming village far from here. Her family raised animals, and from a young age she learned how to read their behavior. She said animals listened when you respected them, not when you forced them. Daniel listened closely. He had never heard anyone explain it that way before. He had always worked with strength and routine. May worked with patience and understanding. The difference showed in the results. He asked why she stayed during the storm. May looked down at her cup before answering. She said she could not leave living beings in danger if she had the power to help. That was all she said, but it was enough. After she rested, Daniel insisted on cleaning the small injury on her arm. It was not serious, but it was deep enough to worry him. He worked carefully, his hands steady, his movements gentle. May thanked him quietly. The silence between them was comfortable, not awkward. It felt like two people who understood each other without needing many words. Later that day, Daniel walked the land to check the damage while May rested inside. As he repaired fences and counted cattle, he kept thinking about her. The way she stood firm in the storm. The way she stayed awake all night to protect animals that did not belong to her. He realized something that unsettled him. He trusted her deeply, and that trust came faster than he ever expected. In the afternoon, May joined him outside. She insisted she was strong enough to help. Daniel did not argue. Together, they worked side by side. May pointed out small things he had overlooked, like a natural path cattle preferred to follow or a low area that always collected water. Daniel felt like he was seeing his own land through new eyes. As the sun lowered, a truck pulled up near the ranch gate. Daniel recognized the man driving. It was a neighbor from a nearby property. The man stepped out, looking around with curiosity and concern. His eyes landed on May and his expression changed slightly. "I heard about the storm," the neighbor said. "Lost a few animals myself." "You're lucky," Daniel nodded. The neighbor asked questions about the damage, about the cattle, about how Daniel managed to save so many. Before Daniel could answer, the man looked at May again and asked who she was. Daniel hesitated just for a second. Then he spoke clearly. "She works here, she helps save the cattle." The neighbor raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. After a few minutes he left, but the feeling he left behind stayed. Daniel knew that word would spread. In small towns it always did. That night Daniel cooked a simple meal. They ate at the same table, something he had not done with another person in years. The house felt different, less empty. May ate quietly but smiled when Daniel asked if the food was okay. She said it reminded her of home, even though it was different. After dinner, Daniel offered her the spare room. He explained that the weather could turn again and the roads were still unsafe. May hesitated. She said she did not want to cause trouble. Daniel told her firmly that she was not trouble. He said she was welcome for as long as she needed. That night, Daniel lay awake listening to the wind outside. It was calm now, gentle. His thoughts drifted back to the storm and the girl who did not run. He wondered where she would have gone if she had not come to the ranch. He wondered how many storms she had already survived in her life. The next morning, May was already awake when Daniel came into the kitchen. She was cleaning, moving carefully, trying to repay his kindness in the only way she knew. Daniel told her she did not need to do that, but she smiled and continued anyway. Over the next few days, a new routine formed. May worked with the cattle and Daniel handled repairs. Slowly, the ranch recovered. The animals were calmer than before. Daniel noticed fewer problems, fewer injuries, less stress. He could not deny it anymore. May was not just helpful, she was changing everything. People from town started stopping by. Some came to offer help, others came out of curiosity. A few asked questions that made Daniel uncomfortable. Where did she come from? How long would she stay? Was everything proper? Daniel answered politely but firmly. He made it clear that May was under his protection. One evening, after everyone had left, May stood near the fence looking toward the horizon. Daniel joined her. She admitted she was afraid that her presence would bring trouble to the ranch, afraid that people would not understand. Daniel told her that fear should not decide her life. He told her that she had already proven her worth in ways no one could deny. May listened quietly. Then she asked him a question that surprised him. She asked if he regretted letting her stay. Daniel did not hesitate. He said no, not for a second. The sun dipped below the land, painting the sky with soft colors. As they stood there side by side, Daniel felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope, not loud or dramatic, just steady and warm like the calm after a storm. Life on the ranch slowly settled into a steady rhythm. The land was still healing from the storm, but each day brought small signs of recovery. Broken fences were repaired one by one. Mud dried and hardened. Grass began to rise again in patches. Daniel worked from morning until evening and May worked beside him, never asking for rest, never complaining. Daniel noticed how naturally May fit into ranch life. She woke up before sunrise, often earlier than him. When he stepped outside, he would see her near the cattle, moving calmly among them. The animals trusted her. Even the most stubborn ones followed her gentle voice and steady steps. Daniel had spent years learning how to control his cattle, but May seemed to understand them in a deeper way. Sometimes Daniel watched from a distance, quietly amazed. May never rushed the animals. She gave them time. If one refused to move, she waited instead of pushing. Slowly the cattle responded. Daniel realized the herd had become calmer overall. There were fewer injuries and less chaos during feeding and movement. During breaks, they would sit near the barn and drink water. May spoke little, but when she did, Daniel listened closely. She told him stories about her village, about working in the fields with her parents, about learning responsibility at a young age. She did not talk about pain directly, but Daniel could hear it between her words. A life that had not been easy, a journey that had taken courage. Daniel shared parts of his own past. He spoke about losing his family years ago, about how silence became his companion. He admitted that the ranch had kept him alive, but it had also kept him alone. May listened without judgment. She never interrupted. When he finished, she simply nodded, as if she understood more than he had said. As weeks passed, the ranch no longer felt like a place frozen in time. Laughter, small but real, returned. Sometimes it was just a quiet smile exchanged over a successful day. Sometimes it was a shared moment of relief when a difficult task was finished. Daniel found himself looking forward to mornings again. But outside the ranch, things were changing. People in the nearby town began to talk. At first, it was harmless curiosity. A few neighbors noticed how well the cattle were doing. Some asked questions about May, where she came from, how long she planned to stay. Daniel answered calmly, keeping his responses short. He did not feel the need to explain her life to anyone. Soon, the questions became sharper. A shop owner asked Daniel if it was safe to keep a stranger on the ranch. Someone else hinted that problems could come if rules were not followed. Daniel felt a familiar tension rise in his chest. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten how quickly the outside world judged what it did not understand. May noticed the change in his mood. One evening, as they finished feeding the cattle, she asked if something was wrong. Daniel hesitated, then told her the truth. He explained that small towns sometimes feared what was different. May listened quietly, her expression calm, but her hands tightened slightly. She said she understood. She had seen this before. She told him she did not want to cause trouble. If her presence created problems, she could leave. Daniel felt a sharp pain at her words. The idea of the ranch returning to silence suddenly felt unbearable. He told her she was not a problem. He told her she had earned her place through hard work and kindness. He said he would not let fear push her away. May did not argue, but Daniel could see the doubt in her eyes. A few days later, a letter arrived from town. It was formal, asking questions about May's work and stay. Daniel read it twice, his jaw tightening. He had known this moment would come. The ranch had always been quiet and unnoticed. Now, because of May, attention had found its way to his door. Daniel chose not to hide. He gathered the documents he had, showing that May was working honestly and contributing to the ranch. He prepared himself to stand firm. During this time, May worked harder than ever. She helped repair distant fencing, organized storage areas, and even improved feeding routines. Daniel worried she was pushing herself too much. When he told her to slow down, she smiled softly and said she wanted to prove she belonged. That night, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table long after May had gone to her room. He realized how deeply she had become part of his life. Her presence had changed the ranch, but more importantly, it had changed him. He was no longer just surviving. He was caring again. That realization frightened him as much as it warmed him. The next morning, a group of people arrived from town. They were polite but serious. They asked questions, looked around, and observed how the ranch operated. May stood quietly nearby, her posture respectful. Daniel answered every question honestly. He spoke about her work, her role in saving the cattle, and the improvements she had brought. One of the men looked at the herd, then back at Daniel. He admitted that the ranch was doing better than expected after the storm. Another mentioned that May's work spoke for itself. The tension slowly eased, but uncertainty remained. After they left, May finally spoke. She said she was grateful for Daniel's support, but she did not want him to face problems because of her. Daniel told her that life always brought challenges. Running away would not solve them. That evening, they stood near the fence again, watching the sun set. The sky was clear, painted with soft colors. May said she had never planned to stay in one place for long. Life had taught her to move when things became difficult. Daniel told her that sometimes staying was the braver choice. Neither of them knew what the future held. But one thing was clear. The bond between them had grown strong, shaped by storms, work, and quiet understanding. And even as shadows of uncertainty stretched toward the ranch, neither of them was ready to let go. The days that followed felt heavier than before. Even though the ranch looked calm on the surface, something uneasy moved beneath it. Daniel could sense it in the way visitors now paused longer at the gate, in the way conversation stopped when he entered town. Nothing open or loud happened, but quiet pressure built slowly, like clouds before another storm. May noticed it too. She tried not to show it, but Daniel could see the change in her eyes. She worked harder, stayed quieter, and avoided attention whenever possible. She kept her head down when people passed by and stayed close to the cattle or the barn. Daniel admired her strength, but it worried him. He did not want her to feel like she had to disappear to belong. One afternoon, Daniel returned from town with a serious expression on his face. May sensed it immediately. She waited until they were alone near the barn before asking what had happened. Daniel hesitated, then told her the truth. Some people were pushing for more checks. They were questioning her stay, her background, and whether everything followed the rules. Nothing had been decided yet, but the tone had changed. May listened quietly. She did not interrupt. When Daniel finished, she nodded slowly. She said she had expected this. She told him she had lived long enough to recognize when a place began to feel unsafe. Her voice was calm, but her words cut deep. That night, May barely ate. Daniel watched her push food around her plate, lost in thought. After dinner, she went outside alone. Daniel followed her after a few minutes. He found her standing near the fence, looking out into the darkness. She told him she had made a decision. She said it softly but firmly. She could not stay if her presence caused trouble for him. She said she was grateful for everything he had done, but she would leave before things became worse. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. He told her she was not a burden. He reminded her of the storm, of the cattle she saved, of the way the ranch had changed since she arrived. He told her she mattered. May looked at him with sad eyes. She said that sometimes caring for someone meant leaving before harm followed. She said she did not want his kindness to become his problem. Daniel struggled to find words. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten how to fight for someone else. But now, the idea of losing May filled him with a fear deeper than loneliness. He told her he would speak again with the officials. He would do whatever was needed. He asked her to wait. May agreed to wait a little longer, but Daniel could feel her pulling away. The next few days passed slowly. May packed small things quietly when she thought Daniel was not looking. She did not take much, just the basics. Daniel pretended not to notice, but every folded item felt like a warning. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. It was official and serious. Daniel read it in silence, his hands shaking slightly. It requested a final meeting and hinted at decisions that could change everything. He sat at the table for a long time, staring at the paper. May entered the room and saw his face. She did not ask questions. She already knew. She walked back to her room and closed the door gently. That afternoon, Daniel went to the barn to clear his head. The cattle moved calmly around him, unaware of the weight pressing on his heart. He thought about the night of the storm, about how close he had come to losing everything. Back then, May had stood firm without hesitation. Now, it was his turn. When Daniel returned to the house, May was gone. At first he thought she had gone for a walk. Then he noticed the room was empty. Her bag was missing. Panic rose in his chest. He searched the house, the barn, the fields. He called her name, his voice breaking. There was no answer. As the sun began to set, Daniel found a small note on the kitchen table. The words were simple and careful. May thanked him for his kindness. She said the ranch had given her safety and dignity when she needed it most. She said leaving was her choice, not his fault. She wished him peace. Daniel felt his legs weaken. He sat down heavily, the note shaking in his hands. The house felt colder than it ever had before. He realized that silence, the old silence, had returned, and it hurt more now because he knew what he had lost. Without wasting time, Daniel grabbed his jacket and keys. He did not know where May would go, but he knew she would not have much. The roads were long and empty. Night approached quickly. He followed instinct more than logic, driving toward the edge of the land where travelers often passed. He found her near a dirt road, walking alone with her small bag. She looked tired but determined. When she heard the truck slow down, she turned. Surprise crossed her face when she saw Daniel. He stepped out and stood in front of her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel told her the truth he had been avoiding. He told her that losing her would be worse than facing any problem. He told her she had brought life back to the ranch and to him. He said that if storms came, they would face them together. May's eyes filled with emotion. She said she did not want to be the reason he suffered. Daniel replied that she was the reason he had found purpose again. He told her staying was not weakness, it was courage. They stood there as the sky darkened. Finally, May nodded. Slowly. She agreed to return not because she was afraid, but because she chose to stay. They drove back to the ranch in silence, but it was not an empty silence. It was full of understanding. As the lights of the house appeared ahead, Daniel knew the hardest part was not over yet. But for the first time, he was ready to face whatever came next, not alone. The ride back to the ranch felt different from before. The road was the same, the land was the same, but something inside Daniel had changed. May sat quietly beside him, holding her small bag on her lap. She looked out the window, watching the dark land pass by. Daniel did not rush. He drove steadily, as if giving the moment the respect it deserved. When they arrived, the house lights welcomed them like a soft promise. Daniel parked the truck and turned off the engine. For a second, neither of them moved. Then May opened the door and stepped out. The cool air touched her face and she took a deep breath. She looked around the ranch, the barn, the fences, the open land. It felt familiar again. Safe. Inside the house, Daniel put water on the stove and made tea. It had become a simple habit, but one that now meant comfort. They sat at the table, hands wrapped around warm cups. May thanked him again, but Daniel gently stopped her. He told her she did not need to keep thanking him. Staying was her choice. That was what mattered. The next morning, Daniel woke early as always. For a brief moment, he forgot everything and expected silence. But then he heard movement in the kitchen. May was already awake. She was preparing a simple breakfast, moving calmly as if she had never left. Daniel felt a quiet relief settle in his chest. They did not speak much that morning. Words were not needed. They went to work as usual. Daniel checked the fences while May tended to the cattle. The animals moved easily, responding to her presence. Daniel watched from a distance and felt proud not just of the ranch, but of the life they were building with patience and honesty. Later that week, the final meeting took place. Officials came again, but this time Daniel was ready. He spoke clearly and firmly. He explained May's role, her work, and her contribution to the ranch and the community. He showed records, repairs, improvements, and testimonies from neighbors who had benefited from her help during the storm. May stood beside him, calm and respectful. She answered questions when asked, honestly and simply. There was no fear in her voice, only truth. After a long discussion, the tone changed. The tension softened. One of the officials acknowledged that May had helped prevent greater loss during the storm. Another admitted that the ranch's recovery had been impressive. In the end, they agreed that May could stay and work legally under proper arrangements. When the truck finally drove away, Daniel let out a long breath he felt he had been holding for weeks. May smiled, small and relieved. It was not celebration, but it was peace. Word spread quickly, but this time it carried a different feeling. People in town began to see May not as a stranger, but as the girl who saved the cattle during the storm. A few neighbors stopped by to thank her. Some brought small gifts, others simply nodded with new respect. Life moved forward, seasons changed slowly, the land healed fully, grass grew thicker, the cattle grew stronger. The ranch no longer felt like a place frozen in grief. It felt alive. Daniel found himself smiling more often, even laughing at small things. He no longer rushed through meals. He no longer dreaded the quiet evenings. May grew more confident too. She began teaching Daniel new methods she had learned growing up. They adjusted feeding routines, improved shelter areas, and even planned small changes for future storms. They worked as a team, trusting each other completely. One evening, as they watched the sun set behind the hills, Daniel spoke honestly. He told May that for a long time he believed his life was already over. He thought survival was enough, but she had reminded him that life could still grow, even after loss. May listened quietly. Then she shared something she had never said before. She told him she used to feel invisible, moving from place to place, never belonging anywhere. The ranch was the first place where she felt seen, not for where she came from, but for who she was. They stood there in silence as the sky changed color. It was not dramatic. It was gentle, real. Months later, another storm came, not as violent as the first, but strong enough to test the land. This time, Daniel did not feel fear. He and May prepared calmly. They guided the cattle early, secured fences, and watched the rain together from the porch. The storm passed. The ranch stood strong. As the land dried and the sun returned, Daniel realized the truth. May was never a miracle in the way people imagined. She was not magic. She did not arrive to save everything alone. She was a human being who chose courage, kindness, and responsibility when it mattered most. And sometimes that is the truest miracle of all. The ranch continued on, season after season. Two people working side by side, facing storms together. Building a life not from luck, but from trust, effort, and quiet strength.